Hello and welcome to Aussie Poker. Here I'm going to share with you the best sit and go tournament to play on Ignition. And well, when you sort of see how some of these hands go, you'll kind of see why it's the best one to play. But basically, the format for this one is actually a double up, but it's not like most of the other double ups that you see on the site. I accidentally clicked the wrong thing here. But actually, this one's not a double up turbo like most of them are, but it's just a normal double up tournament essentially. And yeah, you see this is kind of the first interesting hand. But this is just a double up with no turbo. It's with the 10-minute blind level sit. Gives you a lot more room to outplay the opponents compared to the turbo events. And yeah, this one, like when it goes check on the flop, check on the turn, like this guy clearly doesn't really have anything. So it means, especially when you're blocking the straight with 6-3 and 6-8 as it were. It's a very easy one to raise, especially when you're not blocking the spade draws as well. It is a very good bluffing candidate, and the guy does indeed fold. I feel like he probably had like a two or like ace high based on the fact that he tanked a little bit here. But yeah, we got it through, and means we're already the chip leader. Of course, like with this trainer, we want to talk a little bit about like how you actually do maximize your results because yeah, with this format, I find that even though, it's like a double up where half the players will win, at the same time, it's also a format that I find like I have probably a 66 to 70% of the time that I sort of cash. And also another thing about this format is that, as we kind of see, this is sort of an interesting hand where I like the ace jack off because if I raise, if I free bet, then probably only better hands are really going to be calling me in this sort of stakes. But the first thing you'll kind of notice is actually the players sort of play kind of a lot worse, actually not really any better at 100 compared to like the $5 or $10 games. So even though it's like a higher stake, it's actually, probably just as soft, if not even softer than some of the lower stakes games. Because at least in this game, like they're going to sort of, not just follow you like with ace high, for example, when you jam all in like seven big blinds or like 10 big blinds, like when on ICM they meant just fold it. Like, yeah, that you're actually going to be able to like play it closer like to GTO, like getting punished by them, like just calling with some garbage hand and sort of lucking out on you, as it were. Which I find happens quite a lot in like the $5 or $10 games that, even if you're a big stack, like, you're still gonna have to like win a flip at some point to most likely like get the double up. But yeah, you can see also this like these guys aren't, finding the bluffs at all. So when they play this straightforward, it just allows you to really play very, very exploitatively against them, almost if you can see their cards. Also, if you're enjoying the video, do make sure to like and to also subscribe to the channel. Yeah, this one. And you can sort of see we can play pretty tight, like basically a double up. Tournament plays very similar in spirit to a satellite tournament. And so it means that, yeah, you can sort of play a lot more nitty. So, for example, folding the A7 offsuit here, which just doesn't really play that well post swap in general. Plus, it was like the first time that this guy had raised a hand after limping a lot. So to figure that, okay, his raising range is probably quite strong just because he's limping so much of his range. And yeah, like queen nine off, like you could honestly fold it, it wouldn't be the worst decision. But I thought, okay, these guys are not very good post flop, so let's just leverage that to our advantage. So we make like this sort of dinky bet here where we're just trying to just deny equity and just, get sort of the high cards to fold or, low cards to fold. Since I do still have some equity, when we do pick up the gut shot here, just a very good candidate to fire again. And also we're kind of unblocking diamonds as well. Okay, they're getting the right price to call this bet, but still, this is really to set up a big bet on the river with almost any kind of scare card. Because if he has a hand here, like if he has an ace, he's probably going to raise just to clean up the equity and not allow the draws to get the right price. But yeah, at this point, like a total blank, just a really good candidate to fire again because he's not going to check back a third time with the ace, generally speaking. So when he's capped at basically a 10 or essentially, two pair, it means we can just fire and, decide to pick a size that, looks like a ace just trying to get a 10, getting value from a 10, but also a high enough size where, he hopefully might actually fold a 10 just because we have all the aces in our range having, five free streets, as it were. And he does end up folding, and you can sort of see how, like, using some calculated bluffs can work really well at these stakes, that you can just sort of outplay them by picking good bluff candidates. And okay, this hand, yeah, we see like, yeah, this guy get free streets. Well, ends up just like gut barreling like with ace high free streets. Which, yeah, probably is not a very good candidate. Like you sort of want the opponent to have the ace high of, the ace of diamonds, not you, because you're sort of blocking the missed draws. And sevens, yeah, just like a completely like ridiculous call because you only beat pure bluffs. But yeah, they're just not playing the bluffs enough for these stakes. But yeah, this one's kind of a funny example showing you just how badly these guys play. You can go for really thin value. Yeah, I mean Queen five suited. This one's not a very good play by me actually. Where this one I think I just had a really bad beat in another game I was multi-tabling at the same time. Or actually quite a few in a row, and I was probably a little bit tilted. But okay, because these guys aren't free betting at all, like no one has made a free bet yet in this whole tournament, because most of them are just limping and calling. It does mean you can sort of get away with like min raising some hands that normally would just be folds. And yeah, we end up getting a pretty good flop here where, we just make a small bet. We're using our flush draw and backdoor straight. He calls and, we just hit our hands. So now it's just a question of how much value we can get out of it. And I felt that sixes one where if he has an ace or a king, he's not folding to this bet size. And he does call, the 10 comes, and okay, you just pray that he has queen jack here, even though we block it. But yeah, I figured that okay, if I make it 75% pot, maybe the 10 folds here, but he probably was folding it on the turn anyway. And he is going to be, probably still calling with an ace, like maybe even calling with a king because of how much these guys just love to call down and just, pay you off with value. So yeah, we end up just getting like this massive amount of value. Like if we look before the hand, before that, the stacks were kind of like, 50 big blinds each, where, suddenly with this, like suddenly like almost 2x our stack. So it shows you the value of getting in free streets of value with these sorts of hands. Like, we shouldn't try like balance too much with checks or whatever. If you've got a good hand, like just bet it and just get as much money as you can, generally speaking. And yeah, that worked pretty well because now we're a pretty big chip leader. Like it's at the point where well, certainly, like we are not really trying to get all of the chips. Our goal is just to finish in the top three. So we don't really need to go crazy. Like, just fold the garbage hands and just go on with the next ones. Yeah, this one, like 6-9 suited, yeah, like why not raise and just take the blinds, especially if they're never free betting you. You can just raise almost any two cards and get away with it. But I do still like to fold sometimes because then if you do show that you are able to fold in the button, it means they kind of respect the raises more which actually can prove quite valuable later on when the stacks are quite short. That where they think you're a little bit nitty, then it can allow you to get some things through that you might not otherwise. And yeah, we see this one kind of actually that's sort of a good example. You can sort of see that there was a check here, and like this guy checked back with the jack of clubs, whereas I think if he bets like 10, I'm pretty sure the 10 would just call here. Because even though it's a four liner to a flush, like these guys are sort of really bad at folding. So actually the play here on the button missed a pretty good chance to get some value. I mean, honestly, with the jack, like you'd even fire like the flop and the turn, but anyway, it's not what happened. And also you'll notice with the bet sizings that because the smaller stack, like in these tournaments, you always want to keep an eye on who the shortest stack is, which is the guy in the button with 26.5 big blinds. Because once you get to 20 big blinds, they can very easily jam over you. So that's sort of also reason like with the sizing, like once you have like 20 to 40 big blinds, you'll make it like for the short stack, you'll make it like 2.1 for the raise size. If it's less than 20 big blinds, you might go like either a min raise of two or even just go all in directly, generally speaking. That is like kind of exploitively use a bit of a smaller size, just thinking that okay, they're probably like none of them are free betting me, so I can sort of get away with raising his hands that if it was a more aggressive table, I might just fold. And yeah, this one's like kind of a nice one where, he's unlikely to raise me because these guys just aren't raising post flop in general. And when he does call, like I have a lot of good cards, like the 9 or the 10 gives me a gut shot, any club gives me a flush draw. I can still hit the 8 or the jack for overcards. So it's just a case where sort of like just buying the turn and being able to sort of like get it where I'll probably check. And, if it's a bad card like a 5, we can check back, or if it's a good card, we can fire again. And then when a queen comes, yeah, like you obviously have no real showdown value with jack high, and you're not blocking any like backdoor heart draws or something that came in on the turn. So it's just another good one to fire. And this one you'll sort of notice I'm not just using the same bet size for the for at any time because I sort of figured okay if he has a 3 or a 5, well say if he has a 5, I felt like he's probably calling this bet size. But if I bet something like 5, big blinds, he might still call with a 5 anyway. So I thought if I just bet small and make it look like a really milky bet size, especially keeping in mind that it's a paired board also tend to necessitate betting smaller. Well, it looks like I river a queen and trying to get value from a five or some under pair. So it kind of looks more like a value bet, and you're able to get it through, and yeah, just accumulate more and more chips. And it's also true that in this sort of format, like normally people are meant to, sort of basically fold a bit more than usual, just because the chips that you win aren't really as worth much as the chips that you lose in these sit and go formats, and especially not in the satellites. So it also kind of allows you to kind of exploit that and to run like slightly more bluffs maybe than one normally would in say a GTO setting. This one four way is a very clear check because yeah, someone almost certainly has something. I think if it was heads up, yeah, I would probably call here and try to, hit the back door or the flush or hit the ace or something. But when two people call, you have to know, yeah, your hand's just no good in that spot. It goes check, check. This guy bets and folds. So yeah, clearly this guy here, in the cutoff had something in this spot. Then he has a 10, but he probably had some decent pair at least. Anyway, we have pocket fives here, and yeah, it is still pretty deep stacked, so I think it makes sense just to flat here and try to set mine. Because if you raise big, you're only really getting called by better and folding out worse, in general, and you're also kind of out of position. So I think it's a spot where, yeah, we're quite nice to hit bottom set, of course, or second set. And yeah, like you're never really having a leading range on this board. Like it's just going to be a check. And when he bets, yeah, I figured, okay, what's the raise size I can do where he's still going to call with almost any hand? And I guess if I just make it five big blinds, like it's such a small raise where he has to call three big blinds to win a pot of 12. Like he's going to call with virtually any pair or any sort of draw at this point. So a little bit of an exploitative kind of raise size there. And yeah, again, case like you can't be afraid of the flush draw because the flush is just such a small part of the guy's range at this point. So it just makes sense just to fire, just deny the equity and not give him quite the right price to continue with a flush draw. He does end up calling. Like I'm guessing based on the way the river played, he probably did have some sort of good draw. So we make it 13, like just trying to get value from a jack or a nine or some two pair. Because yeah, to be surprised what people call with, like they call with like a nine thinking, oh, the draw's kind of missed. But okay, we don't get paid the final street, but that shows the value of but continuing to bet every street when you have really good hands. So that if the board does run out badly or they just miss their hand, well still you can get like some value along the way. And yeah, this one, yeah, if we look at this, it's like a multi-way pot. But we do have top pair and we do have the gut shot, so it's really a pretty good board for us in that sense. I mean, if someone donks at this point, it's definitely one where you can just basically raise on them to close to the size of the pot. Like if they donk for two big blinds, you can definitely make it 6 to 7 big blinds raise. But yeah, this one, yeah, we're just betting small, like just getting that value from the weaker hands, like the weaker draws, like some, Jack 9, Jack 8, this sort of thing, or, 10 9, 10 8. And yeah, it's a pretty safe river as well. So even though like there are some multi-way spots where yeah, you should sort of be a bit more cautious and, pot control when you sort of have a top pair or like some sort of pair. This is a case where like because they only just called like with that sort of board, they probably raise if they had something good like a two pair. There's like a lot of, turns and rivers are quite bad for him. So again, we can just value bet Finn, like just get value from the worst pairs. We do get a call. And this is the key, like the way to exploit these guys and these double ups where they're just like very soft and you don't really know any GTO. You can just exploit them just by betting Finn for value. And against a really smart player, like they're gonna raise you some of the time with like a 10 or a jack as a bluff, like to try to get you to fold top pair. But okay, this guy does end up folding, but there will be a lot of people who will pay you off with a weaker pair in that spot. I mean, he could very well just had like some sort of like 10 or something like a sticky 10-8 or like king 10 that just didn't want to fold. Like it honestly wouldn't shock me in this with these sort of games. But okay, we get king queen off, and if we look at the stacks, we can see that the small blind is potentially a jamming stack. But since no one's been free betting us, we can get away with just going for it here. And okay, we don't get paid off on this one, but like there was a time in the past where I used to sort of check on these sort of flops and try to let them catch up a little bit, like hit an ace or something. But they can also hit their flush draw, so I think it's better just to sort of bet. And because like this guy's probably going to call with a four, for example. So you just want to get the value, even though you're blocking some of the calling range. And yeah, they're not always going to be able to pay you off, but it's better than getting sucked out on with a bad turn or river, which there are actually a lot of them on that board with the flush and straight draws. But anyway, This one, yeah, I don't think anything too interesting happens, but okay, I guess we're about to find out was like a raise fold. Okay, not too much to see there, and to be fair, but I mean, when they raise post flop, yeah, usually they've got it, especially on the turn, and absolutely, especially on the river, it's almost always the nuts, but or very close to it. But anyway, yeah, let's see. This guy just raised his bets. The other guys fold, pretty standard. And yeah, when this guy raises, like I decide to put the 10 jack off in my flatting range. Because if I raise it, I feel like he's only calling better and basically folding out everything worse. Whereas by calling, I sort of keep some of his sort of bluffs in. And okay, he's only been raising 12% of hands, so that's part of it as well. Yeah, like with this one, I mean, there's a universe in GTO where you're meant to like raise with some of these bad gut shots, but I also felt like it's a spot where I can also just sort of flat and kind of sort of see what happens. Kind of playing like, not building the pot too big when, when you're not really trying to accumulate chips so much as to, get in top three and get the money. But okay, we run really good and we end up hitting the straight and we try to get some value. He ends up folding, so he probably was just like betting with nothing and when he's betting with nothing, yeah, it can be nice sort of to keep some of the bluffs in as well. In these cases, I like to float and like take it on the turn. But yeah, in this case, he doesn't pay us off, and again, they're not always going to be able to pay you off, but a lot of the time, say they will. So, and this one, yeah, I think is quite a fun one because I believe I actually jammed in this hand, and yeah, like it's sort of one of these cases where he's going to have a very narrow calling range. Like when someone raises and we jam, like this guy here in the big blinds only really meant to call, I think, with aces and kings and like I think even like ace king offsuit might be a fold, and even queens might actually be a fold in that spot for him, just because he's in a position where he could almost fold like every single hand and probably make the money in most cases, just because of how short stacked a lot of the other guys are. And the other guy also folds here as well. So again, kind of a nice way just to build up the stack more and more. I mean, the rest of this hand is more just like kind of just basically pushing all these guys around where yeah, it's true. Like in a GTO world, you could just jam with Queen Four suited, and the other guy here is meant to fold everything except aces, more or less, and kings and so forth. But yeah, it's also true that these guys aren't playing GTO. Like they might just call with like ace five or something, and then like win a flip. And that actually happened to me quite a few times in the session today, and a few other events like the double up turbos, where it'd be like the big stack by far, and I'd make some sort of jam, like it's just standard, GTO jam, and I would just call like with some weak ace they're sort of meant to fold, but then they'd sort of win the flip, then someone else would win a flip against me, and suddenly it'd be like a middle stack, like there were so many like tourneys where I like yeah just I had like an 80 to 90% chance to win with my stack, and it just went really badly against me. So I mentioned sort of to make the point that yeah, in these sort of events, like you don't want to sort of yeah like basically always make like the absolute best play in a GTO world, because sometimes they'll just call you down with anything and then sort of punish you by getting in all these sort of all-in pots, whereas you'd have like maybe a 99% chance of cashing if you just didn't like engage in the first place. Okay, this one, yeah, he pays us off one street, which is pretty nice. Obviously, we're going to go for more value, and the reason I picked this half pot bet size is it just sets us up very well to jam the river, like pretty much any river we're just going to jam here, and there's a good chance he'll pay us off and just and okay, ends up like jamming at this point, whereas a little bit of a cooler for him because he ended up like turning two pairs, so just a bit tough for him. But yeah, that's sort of a case where again you can sort of see the benefit of not like going completely bonkers. That you can just use this small bet where they're going to call with bottom pair, and if they hit their five or they hit the queen, yeah, they're just basically just going to lose everything at this point. Also, a good example when someone raises, like they're not really raising with worse than two pair, generally speaking, where it's like a turn or a river raise. I mean, some people even on the flop they're only raising with two pair or better, but yeah, it's sort of a good example of seeing like what the villains are typically doing in these games. And with that, we are now in the bubble situation where when this guy raises again, you can just basically just go ham on him because this guy is. I mean, technically, I'm actually meant to jam the queen nine suited in this spot, but because these guys like have virtually never been like free betting or four betting, just thinking, okay, if I do a smaller raise, it allows me to get him to fold without putting myself in a situation where, like, say, if I go all in, he calls, he ends up winning the all in. Well, in that case, I've kind of lost my chip lead and can't really push him around anymore. Whereas if he sort of jams here, which means he has like aces or kings, or at least if he's playing correctly, it means you just get away a lot more cheaply and you still have a massive chip lead. And Yeah, and he does get the message and does just fold at this point. Also, if we look at our stats, like you can't see the stats right now, but they're on my screen. You can see like right now I have like, a VPIP of 45, pre-flop raise percentage of 36%, and a free bet percentage of 20%. Also happen to have a C bet percentage actually of 100%, 6 out of 6 hands, which okay, it may have been because we've been hitting a lot of boards. I can do sometimes, check it back as well. But yeah, it's sort of a good example of how you really get rewarded a lot for playing aggressively in these games because these guys just don't know how to handle it, essentially. Like they either, call down way too light when they have quite strong hands, or they just fold like way too, tightly when you're sort of bluffing compared to GTO. Because in the games that they play, like they used to people just never really bluffing on the river. And so that's something you can really use to your advantage in some calculated cases. Like we've kind of seen already. Just skipping ahead a little bit to get to the part where we have a little bit more action. We're getting kind of close to the end with being, you have like this guy is 16 as a short stack, so the people on 34 big blinds or 32 blinds really should be very tight. And yeah, like calling's never really a thing in the small blind. It's either basically jam or fold in this spot, more or less, is what he should be doing. But he ends up calling, and yeah, this is sort of why where which I think in GTO World you can even bet like just one big blind here because of the ICM pressure on the small blind, but I figure okay, he's calling anything if I bet one big blind, so let's just go free and just get him to fold out the equity. And also, see that's the thing with like these satellite style formats that a lot of it is about basically like denying the opponent's equity is sort of more important than necessarily like playing like getting the maximum chips possible sometimes. Like you win a pot, well that basically kind of makes you a lot closer to, winning the whole thing as such. And yeah, this one's kind of another example like this guy, because there's a stack that's shorter and you can only really call with a very, very tight range. So it means that you can basically jam any two cards almost if you want to. Again, if you're jamming any two cards, what I find out perhaps is they just get really tilted and might call like 6-5 suited or something later. And it means like if you lose that, then suddenly like you're not so sure to win it necessarily if that happens a few times, get kind of unlucky, which actually happened to me a lot of times. So that's why, yeah, sometimes I like to, yeah, like not sort of raise like any two cards from the button. Even though in GTO World, like I should just be jamming any two cards from pretty much any position is like the objectively best way to play it. But what I find is that when you do that, you actually often get punished by these players making calls that they shouldn't. But okay, this one, yeah, I do like mix in, like because they're all a very similar stack size, you can basically push them against each other where they can't really call with much at all because, if they win a hand, they still don't have that good a shot, to that much better of a shot to, make the final free and double up. But if they lose, then they just lost like $100 basically. So this one, yeah, kind of a fun one where this guy does a big raise size. And I mean, probably I should just jam, but I decided to get cute and just sort of flat with the idea that, yeah, if I hadn't hit the ace, I probably would have jammed. But I figure, okay, if I check, he's probably going to do the betting for me, given he has a pretty good hand and he does a jam and that just just shuts it out because he has pocket eights and yeah, he's just dead basically. Bit of a sweat on the river of having your open ender, but yeah, it ends up missing. So yeah, I think this was a bit of a fun one where I tried to go through the hands a little bit more quickly on this one compared to some of the others. I guess I'll reach a point that I played so many of these double ups and like studied the satellite formats because double up and satellite's basically almost the same format in terms of ICM. I played inside so much I kind of just know all the principles and can kind of go for it relatively quickly. So that's why I decided just to sort of give kind of a relatively quick overview of how this tournament went and how I was able to win it very convincingly, as opposed to going too deep into every single little detail, as it were. But yeah, do let me know in the comments below if you enjoyed this format of this video showing like my most successful event from today's session. And yeah, I mean it's true. Like I guess the final point to mention is yeah, it's true. I end up like getting like the vast majority of the chips, like just having a massive chip lead. But the idea with these formats is you're not necessarily trying to get like a monster stack every time. It's just about doing whatever it takes to get to the final free. And yeah, when you are a much bigger stack, you can definitely leverage the ICM and just, jam and raise like way wider than, you would be able to if you were a shorter stack. Like if I was a shorter stack in this situation, I definitely, would tighten up quite a lot and be very tight against jams and all this sort of thing. But yeah, it does show one advantage where if you are able to like build up a big stack somewhat quickly. It does allow you to put a lot more ICM pressure than when you're one of the shorter stacks and kind of have to jam and hope that they don't call or that you win a flip if they do call this sort of thing. Like you definitely want to be the one to jamming, not the one getting jammed on. It's the general principle for these sort of formats. And also sounds like that none of these guys like who are playing in Ignition are really understanding how the ICM works. So it's also something you can sort of leverage to your advantage in that respect. So anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this one, and yeah, I'll see you in the next training. Take care.